Watch this. This tiny see-through creature drifting in the dark water is dying. It's old, or it's hurt, or it's starving, and its little body is starting to shut down. Its cells failing, its bell caving in on itself as it sinks toward the bottom. This is the part where, for every other animal that has ever lived, the story ends. But keep watching, because it doesn't die. Its whole body folds in, collapses down into a shapeless little blob on the seafloor, and then slowly that blob starts to rebuild. Not into a corpse, into a beginning. It grows back younger than it was. It turns itself into a baby again. And then it does the whole thing over, and it can keep doing it, as far as anyone can tell, forever. This is the one animal on Earth that has found a way to go backwards. The one that beat the thing none of us can. Stay with me, because I'm going to show you exactly how a living thing cheats death, and why it might matter to you more than you'd ever guess. This is Turritopsis dournii. Most people just call it the immortal jellyfish, and for once the nickname isn't an exaggeration. It is barely there, smaller than your little fingernail, a clear little thimble with a glowing red core and a fringe of fine tentacles, so tiny and so common that you have almost certainly swum near one without the faintest idea it was there. And it may be the closest thing to a truly immortal animal that has ever existed. And we found that out, fittingly, entirely by accident. Back in the 1980s, a young researcher was keeping some of these little jellyfish in a tank, doing what you're supposed to do, waiting for them to grow up, breed, get old, and die, so he could study the full cycle. Except they wouldn't die. Instead of aging away, the adults kept collapsing back into their young form and starting over, right there in the dish, cheating him out of the ending again and again. It took years before anyone really grasped what they were looking at. Not a mistake, not a fluke, but a small animal, quietly breaking the most basic rule in all of biology. To feel how strange that really is, you have to remember the one rule every other living thing on this planet obeys, without a single exception. You are born, you grow up, you get old, and you die. Time only runs one way. A caterpillar becomes a butterfly. A butterfly never turns back into a caterpillar. A child grows into an adult. No adult has ever shrunk back into a child. Life is a one-way street, for everything. A tadpole, an oak tree, a blue whale, you, me, every living thing that has ever existed, except for this one tiny jellyfish, which somehow found the reverse gear. Here is what actually happens. A normal jellyfish lives its adult life as what biologists call a medusa, the drifting, pulsing, umbrella-shaped thing you picture when you hear the word. And when a medusa gets old or badly hurt, it dies, like anything else alive. But when Turritopsis is pushed right to the edge, when it's starving or injured or simply worn out with age, instead of dying, it does the thing almost no one believed was possible. Its cells begin to transform, not to heal, to change what they fundamentally are. A muscle cell becomes a nerve cell. A nerve cell becomes something else again. Scientists call it transdifferentiation, and it is about as close to real magic as biology ever gets. The entire animal reorganizes itself, top to bottom, and collapses back down into a polyp, the tiny stalk-like form it started life as, before it was ever a jellyfish at all. And from that polyp it grows up all over again, into brand new medusae. It doesn't patch up the old body, it rewinds it, all the way back to the beginning, and starts over, the same creature, genetically identical, but biologically brand new. And here's the part that truly bends your mind. There is, as far as anyone has ever been able to find, no limit to how many times it can pull this off. A frog gets one life. You get one life. This jellyfish, in principle, gets as many as it likes, dying its way back into a baby, growing up and folding back again, on a loop, with no end written into it. In a lab, researchers watched a single one do this, over and over and over. It isn't that it simply lives a very long time. It's that it may have no natural finish line at all. It has, in the most literal biological sense there is, unhooked itself from death by old age. Try, just for a second, to picture that happening to a person. An old man at the very end, not dying but softening, folding down, his body dissolving and then slowly reforming, and out of it drifting a newborn. The same him, the same essential thread of a life, but with every single year wiped clean and the whole thing to live over. In us, that's a nightmare or a fairy tale. In this jellyfish, it's just an ordinary Tuesday. So why isn't the ocean drowning in immortal jellyfish? Why aren't they piled up to the surface everywhere by now? Because immortal is not the same thing as invincible. That reverse gear only works against aging and injury. It does absolutely nothing against a hungry mouth. And a jellyfish the size of a fingernail, drifting helpless in the open sea, is food for 1,000 things: small fish, sea turtles, bigger jellyfish, and the vast invisible clouds of larger plankton that comb the water for exactly this. The overwhelming majority of Turritopsis never get anywhere close to using their gift. They get eaten, or trapped in a bloom that starves, or taken by disease, long before old age was ever going to be the problem. So the immortality is completely real. It's just a promise the ocean almost never lets them keep. This animal genuinely can live forever. It's simply that almost none of them ever do, and yet just enough of them slip through to have quietly pulled off something a little unsettling. Because a creature that can reset itself all the way back to zero whenever things turn bad is extraordinarily hard to wipe out. And it turns out these jellyfish have been hitching rides in the ballast water that big cargo ships pump in and out of their hulls, riding the shipping lanes from one ocean to the next. Slowly, silently, with no one ever deciding it should happen, the immortal jellyfish has spread itself right across the planet. It started out in one sea, and now it turns up in warm and cool waters all over the world. There is a genuinely good chance that one is drifting, at this exact moment, in the nearest water to wherever you are, endlessly resetting itself in the dark, while everything around it has no idea it's even there. Biologists have half-jokingly started calling it a silent invasion. Not a violent one. Nothing is being attacked. Just an animal that can't be permanently killed off, calmly turning up in one sea after another, outlasting problem after problem because the single thing it will never do is stay dead. And if a fingernail-sized animal that beat death and quietly colonized the entire ocean is the kind of thing you want more of, do me a favor and subscribe. There's a new wild survival story here every week. Now stay with me, because there's a final piece to this, and it's the one that turns this tiny drifting speck from a curiosity into something that might, one day, actually reach into your own life. Because we have spent the whole of human history losing, completely and without exception, to a single enemy: time. Everything ages, our cells wear down, pile up damage, and eventually stop. And then there's this near-invisible scrap of an animal that just doesn't play by that rule, that can take an old failing body and coax its cells backwards into a young one. And scientists are studying very seriously exactly how it does that, how a cell that is already committed to being one thing can be talked into becoming young and new again, because that trick, cellular reprogramming, sits right at the heart of the entire dream of slowing, or maybe even one day reversing, human aging. That same basic idea, reaching into a grown, specialized cell and coaxing it back to a young, unwritten state, has already turned whole corners of medicine upside down, and it's one of the most closely watched frontiers in all of science. And a big part of the reason we even know it's possible is that this jellyfish has been quietly doing it, down in the dark, for millions of years before we ever thought to ask. We are never going to become jellyfish, but this drifting speck may be holding, inside its clear little body, a clue to the oldest question our species has ever asked: whether getting old truly has to be a one-way door. It figured out, a long time ago, that the answer is no. We're only now trying to learn how it reads the map. So, that first one, the old dying jellyfish from the very beginning, sinking and shutting down in the dark. It didn't end there. Its body folded inward and dissolved and reknit itself into a tiny blob on the seafloor, and out of that in time rose new young medusae, drifting up into the water, pulsing softly, brand new, the very same animal, and yet without a single day of age left on it, ready to live the whole thing all over again. It didn't survive by being strong or fast or clever. It survived by refusing entirely to accept the one ending that every other living thing on Earth simply has to. So if this strange little creature got under your skin, subscribe. There's a new wild survival story here every single week. And be honest with me, down in the comments, if you could do exactly what it does, undo the aging, fold your whole life back to the start, and grow up again as many times as you wanted, with no end, would you take it? Would you actually want to live without ever stopping? Because somewhere out in the sea tonight, in the cold and the dark, something the size of your fingernail already does, and already has, maybe more times than anything alive could ever count,